Hey, I'm Steven Seifert. This is Terry McCafferty, my dulcimer builder. And we want to show you about this new model that we've been working on for how long?
Going on 4 years now.
That's right.
A long journey.
So, where do you want to start? You want to start with
I
the.
give a little intro of,
Okay.
we're from Patterson, Texas, where it's a rainy day today, and I'll take you through the journey. This started probably really 6 years ago, maybe, Everett, Michigan. I was sitting around after the festival, visiting, and everybody was talking about their background. It came out that I was from an electronics career, and so all of a sudden, these folks think I need to be doing an electric dulcimer.
Yeah, and I'd known Terry for years, like 25 years or
Yeah.
something, or longer. And I knew he was a good woodworker. And all these years, I've been trying out his dulcimers and always thinking these sound good. So when we weren't just talking about electronics
Right.
about 5, 6 years ago or whatever. We were talking about also maybe him making a dulcimer that I could try out.
Right, right. And then about 4 years ago, a performer came through, and I won't mention his name because I didn't really tell him we were doing this, but he kind of threw down the gauntlet during a home concert in front of all my neighbors that this is what needs to happen. So I got interested in it, and we've chased it for about 3 or 4 years now, on and off. But it's been a long journey. I'll explain a little bit about what we've done. One of our goals was to do an electric dulcimer. I wanted to start with my acoustic model, so I didn't have to build the wooden part and the electronics, so that we could discover the electronics needed to make this happen. One of the things we wanted to achieve was to not negatively affect the unplugged acoustic sound of the instrument. Most of the time, the instruments that I've seen and the ones that I started doing, once you start putting a bunch of stuff in them, then the acoustic nature goes down. And so that started. This is kind of a replica of a piece of a fretboard, if you will. So the first step was I had a well-known pickup manufacturer build me a custom pickup, and you fit it on there and you glue it on top of the dulcimer. And electrically, it sounded great, but acoustically, it lost some of its punch. It lost some resonance, and we studied that. And the obvious reason is the top of the dulcimer and the fretboard are the most important vibrating members of the dulcimer as far as the voice is. And we put a big weight right out here on top of it. And so you would expect that to dampen it. So, scratching my head many, many times, I came up with the idea of, let's have a pickup that mounts to the back of the dulcimer, is adjustable in height so that you can adjust how far you are from the strings, but it does not touch the fretboard. It goes through holes in the dulcimer. Here's one that is done. It goes through the holes in the top. So this has no negative effect on the fretboard or the top of the instrument. It was remarkably different. We had very good acoustic. We did a lot of digital recording. Very good acoustic characteristics. So that was the journey on the magnetic, and this took quite a while. It's novel. We're researching some patent ideas on that.
And we did some neat experiments where we
Lots of
we
experience.
started with the original where the pickup was on the fingerboard, and we set a microphone and a little cradle for the instrument, and we wanted every change we made, we wanted to hear if how has it affected the acoustic quality. And when we went from the pickup that was on the fingerboard to this new one, it was very noticeably different when we compared later to the sound. And we used the same instrument, actually.
Absolutely, yeah.
to
We
do that.
started with an instrument. We cut holes in it. We recorded it. Well, we recorded it before we cut holes. We cut holes, recorded. Then we put the pickup in and recorded. So we tried to cover all the bases to validate the results with real data. Another goal that I had was on the bridge. I see when I build dulcimers, sometimes people start their dulcimer journey, and along the way, they decide to change strings. They want a heavier string, they want more punch, they want a higher action, a lower action, and they need a luthier. I'm across the country, maybe, but they have to find someone to work on their dulcimer. So, in doing the pickups, I wanted a way for the artist to be able to do some adjustments.
Yeah, and we're talking about a 2 pickup instrument. So this is the magnetic, and we'll talk
Exactly.
about what's different about that. But now we're talking about the under the saddle piezo
bridge.
pickups.
Right. For many years, I've used the K&K piezo underneath the top of the dulcimer, and it does a good job picking up the sound for what it is. But if you bump the top of the instrument, you pick up noise. It gets that thump. So we set out to get rid of that. So in this design, each string has its own piezo pickup. We custom do these pickups. They're machined out of tusk, so they have a very good frequency response. So each pickup, here's one that is installed, can be adjusted. You loosen this little screw and you can adjust it so you can adjust your intonation. So if you go up in a bigger string, then you can scoot this back a little bit to bring the intonation. Also, there are precision shims that will come with the instrument. It'll be set up when you get it, but you will get extra shims, a wrench, you'll get the tools to do it. But you can adjust, these shims fit in these slots, and you can adjust the height of your pickup basically. Take some out, add some in.
And this is different players want a subtly different action or height there. And so this is awesome that I could be at home and realize, hey, this is a little lower,
Right.
and I can boost it up.
And as players move through their career, they change what they want. And so we did that, and I'm very happy with that. Then you move down to the nut end of the dulcimer. And so what I've done with the nut, instead of gluing the nut in, if you don't glue the nut in and it's not real tight, it can move on you. So what I've done is I've machined the nut so that it has a little slot in it. And there's a pin in the nut gap on the fretboard. And then you can put the shims of choice, different colors or different thicknesses. And then you put this back on, and the nut cannot move, but you can adjust it. So if you want to raise the nut or lower the nut, you're in good shape. If you want to turn your dulcimer into a baritone, the bridge slots will handle baritone strings and bass strings, but the nut, you would just need to get a new nut, which I could send you with different slot sizes in it, and you could convert your dulcimer to a baritone. So,
I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, first of all, a lot of people say, my dulcimer strings seem a little too high. I think I need a new dulcimer, right? But I've typically just taken it to a setup person who will make those fine adjustments, and then I'm off and running. This allows you to do it at home, and to be able to go to a baritone dulcimer by just making some adjustments on your instrument without taking it out of your house, that is awesome.
okay. So this is what a dulcimer with all the options, and I'm going to produce a PDF document by the time this comes out. You can go to my website under the Facts tab, and you can look at the options and you can look at pricing. But basically, I mean, this is the Seaford model. It's got all his bells and whistles with the radius fretboard, flat peg head, the new nut, the new magnetic pickup that does not affect the top of the dulcimer, and the bridge pickups. One thing about the bridge pickup is this type, you must decide, do you want a 3-string dulcimer or do you want a 4-string dulcimer? Because each string has its own pickup. This is a 3-string. What I just showed you would handle, would it be 4 strings? And I won't go into this. He's going to do some recording and really demo this stuff. But some players are now going to a tapered string pattern where this is narrower so they can pick faster, but it's standard width down there for
I want to
fretting.
show that. This nut spacing is more what you would expect on a dulcimer. But as you approach the saddles, it gets more narrow, and this is for flat picking, so your pick is not having to move quite as far each time. And this is something that Aaron O'Rourke has really pioneered, and I've tried to get away from it, but it just works. It's easier to play cleaner and faster. But if you don't like that narrow spacing that I'm using, showing this part.
You can see that the pickup on this saddle is offset. If I take this saddle and put it over here, and take this saddle and put it over here, now the spacing of the strings at the bridge is the same as at the nut. So again, you can try the tapered strings. If you don't like it, you can go back.
Yeah,
So again, you can make the adjustments.
Yeah. And this is why we can't have a dulcimer that does both 3 and 4 string.
Right.
But, you know, I really think it's worth it. And if you want the 4-string model, he can do that.
Absolutely. And one little deal right here, which seems trivial, but most of the jacks that go on dulcimers, you have to remove them from the inside. You have to install them from the inside. And so I've done this jack plate that allows me to install this from the outside, and it just unplugs from the main board. So it's very easy to service that jack. If you get debris in it or the contacts fail, I give you one, and or if I'm with you, I put it in. So again, we want to make this very serviceable. You have to have a battery, and you have to have a door to get stuff in.
So this has a preamp in it.
Oh yes, it's fully electronic.
A preamp basically boosts the levels and conditions the signal so that the quality is preserved, the tone is preserved, even at longer distances on a cable. You can have a preamp outside of the dulcimer. It's really nice to have it inside the dulcimer.
Yeah.
And it does require a battery.
You have very short distance between your pickups and your electronics, so it's very noise immune. And I'll go over some things we've done to ensure that it's very quiet.
Let's show them the battery cover.
So this is how you would change the battery. You just open that up, pull the battery out, and put in a new one.
And I want to talk about, just real quick, a lot of builders, they end up putting things inside and you can't quite get to it easily after the fact. Terry has put a door here, not so much for the player, although that is an option, but really for the builder to get in there, or anyone who's qualified to get in there and maybe fix something or update something.
In service. And without a doubt, I think the biggest development investment of my time, which has been much longer than I expected, has been in packaging this, in getting all the stuff in this dulcimer where it's secure and reliable and easy to service. So one thing is on the controls. I don't know how many prototypes we made, really, to find a place to put knobs that didn't get in Steven's way. We had knobs here and here and here. He's all over it. So
well, look, if you put a volume knob right here, which we tried originally, you end up hitting it every once in a while. So I love Terry's idea here of getting these.
Well, we even had them started on this other side, but that's up against your body if you're a right-handed player. So we came up with this idea of using thumb wheels, and so as you can see, we have volume and tone for the bridge pickup.
And that's your acoustic sounding one.
Right. It sounds very, I'm not going to say guitarish, but very acoustic. And then you have your volume and your tone and a coil selector that I'll talk about for the fretboard, the magnetic pickup. The coil selector, you can have it in the H means humbucker.
Tell them about the coil selector a little bit.
Okay, yeah. So this is a humbucker pickup. That means it has 2 coils in it, and if you're in a very high electrical noise area, this thing's an antenna, so it picks up some of this electrical disturbance that's in the air, and with the parallel coils, that tends to cancel itself out. It gives a warmer sound. If you get rid of one of these coils electrically, then you have a single coil pickup, which is a little brighter,
A little chimier, I think, a little
something
bit.
Stephen just had to have. And so this switch allows you to go from single coil to the parallel humbucker.
And I'll just say briefly, when you're playing kind of a cleaner electric sound, you're probably going to want the single coil. Even there's a little noise in there, it's so low. And even just by moving your dulcimer a little bit, you'll hear it go away. But if you're going to do high gain distortion effects, that's where using the humbucker is great, because there's almost no noise that I hear at this point. I haven't heard anything, actually.
Right. We have not been able to, early on we could pick up some hum, but I'll show you some things that I've done electrically we don't get it. We've got no noise
Right.
during any of this.
And
testing.
this piezo pickup under the saddle, I have heard those on various instruments over the years, even on some guitars, where there is some noise, but because of the steps you took, we're not getting any noise on that. I mean, this is the cleanest pickup system, especially combining all this stuff I've ever heard.
And then so that's what you would get as the electric dulcimer. The next step up is a MIDI interface. This 13-pin connector is an interface to go to a MIDI processor, in which you can create other instruments and all kinds of synthesizer effects that Terry has no clue how to do, but Steven's all over it.
If you know about what MIDI is, this is not sending out MIDI, but it's exactly what you need to end up with MIDI. So you're going to run a cable that's sending individual output from each
the
one of
string.
these saddles
Right.
into a guitar synthesizer that then turns each string's pitch information into digital information, telling the computer what's the note, how hard did you hit it, when does it stop, and when does it start. That's the main messages. So this is something not everybody's going to want, but I've wanted it since I was 16 in an instrument, and I'm 49, so this is like a dream come true. And you don't, even if you have it, you might not use it all the time, but to have that option for some of us, it's really important.
Yeah, a simple thing he did last night that just blows me away is this thing is plugged into that. He can hit a switch, and all of a sudden, this is an acoustic bass instrument. I mean, it shifts the notes, the tuning down an octave.
1 or 2 octaves.
And it was awesome. I mean, because you have a very easy to play bass. When we make a bass dulcimer, the strings are huge. It's very hard to play.
If you were doing like
Just that was cool.
if you were doing looping, you could bring in the bass sound. Another good one is the string sound. There's a pedal on the device. I strum a chord. You hear strings holding that chord, and it holds that while I play dulcimer sounds coming from either one of these pickups.
And
So
this is part of the MIDI. So it's a control voltage, which is normally used for volume, but in the programming of your MIDI processor, you can make it do other things. But it's labeled as volume because most of the time that's what it's used for. In this program switch, the MIDI processor you configure different programs, different voices,
different sounds. Or
patches,
settings.
whatever they call them. And with this, you can go up one or down one without having to reach over and mess with the equipment.
Right, and I want to point out too, on this dial here that's set to volume in the synthesizer by default, you can assign that to filter, cutoff. You can assign that to envelope, like the attack envelope. So those of you who want that will appreciate that.
Right. So that's the basic. So what's in the box? Okay.
So before you show us what's in the box, show the top again. This, I want to make the point that these two different kind of pickups both come out of this jack blended.
Right.
And the blend is determined by the volume you set here on these dials. You can have all of one, all of the other, and you might want to experiment with mixing them. If you plug a mono cable into this, you get that blended signal. If you plug a stereo splitter into this, you can isolate the two, which for recording purposes might be cool.
And also, if you're using the MIDI, pin 7 of the MIDI has that same, whatever's coming out here, it's going to come out pin 7 to your MIDI system.
And very briefly, since you're getting individual strings coming out on individual pins, one example of this would be you could record that as 3 different tracks into a computer, which could then convert each one of those into its own MIDI track, which you could then turn into tablature. So anyone who's familiar with some of these fancier features is going to appreciate that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right, so what's going on inside this thing?
Okay. In amongst the rain noise.
Yeah, a lot of rain here.
But whatever. So I've talked about the pickups. So let's talk about a non-MIDI dulcimer. An electric dulcimer has both pickups and some phenomenal electronics. So we've taken components from Graphtec. They're the source of some of the material in our pickups. But I've looked inside some electric guitars, and they tend to look like a rat's nest inside. Lots of wires everywhere, issues with grounding, and if you have what's called ground loops, then you're going to pick up hum. So I designed a circuit board to manage these controls. So there is a lot of wires running around independently. You know, the jack plugs, I quit shaking, just plugs in. Okay, the battery just plugs in. The preamp, there's a cable runs from here to the preamp. So it all plugs in nicely. Not a lot of stray wiring. It went to great effort. If you look on this board, you kind of see the green area, and you can see underneath it, there's copper. That's called a ground plane. And so this is preventing electrical signals from getting into the inputs of the electronic.
And this is not what Graphtec made. Terry designed
No, this is our product.
Yeah.
So we have basically taken some of the Graphtec core stuff, because they make a wonderful preamp that mates up very nicely with these pickups, and it gives it a very nice acoustic sound. There's some processing going on in there. So inside this case, these are custom cases that we make for the product, because I think typically people just mount the board inside the guitar, but it's open to the electromagnetic whirl. So this is the lid for the MIDI one, but you can see we nickel plate inside, nickel coat the inside. So this is electrically conductive, and it comes out this ground screw, which grounds into everything else to minimize the noise that can get into this system. So that would be your basic electric dulcimer.
Right. And this is the version with no MIDI option.
No MIDI option, right.
So I'm using the one with the MIDI option, and that's what you've got over here.
Yeah. So once we move over there, it's the same thing. It's got a different, thicker lid on it, and it has another board stacked on top of it. And this board is called a Hexpander. It's been around for a lot of years, and it does a wonderful job of taking the string signals and feeding them and processing them so that the signals are ready for a MIDI processor to turn them into instruments. So it's essentially the same board, except I had to add the area for the MIDI controls right here. But other than that, it's the same circuitry. If you go with the MIDI, then this ribbon cable plugs into here, and that's our 13-pin connector that goes to your MIDI processor. I wanted it convenient to get this thing in and out of this dulcimer. So there is the control board is on this side of the dulcimer. There's a block on this side that has magnets in it. Okay, so I've got 2 magnets in here, this hollow box. I did not want to mount stuff on the top of the dulcimer, and I wanted a minimal amount on the back. So I've got a battery on the back, but everything else is on the sides of the dulcimer, which is fairly inert from a voice effect. And so this part has magnets on it, and basically it just goes in there and it just snaps in place.
And these are pretty strong magnets, and they don't affect the signals at all.
Oh, no. And so that goes in like that. And so that's how that so this mounts on one side, this mounts on the other side. Your pickups mount. They're joined together with a wiring harness, and that's it.
And these little wires, almost all of them are shielded, right?
These are not, because these are low impedance logic signals. But all of our pickups, the cable that comes from the magnetic pickup is shielded. This is shielded cable here. So again, we've done everything we possibly could to minimize any kind of electrical effects from outside sources. And it seems very, very effective.
You've done some nice things to the nut. So in Nashville, people are really picky about the nut on a guitar in particular. Mm-hmm. You really want the string to be able to pass through there cleanly, so that when you bend strings or play hard, you're not knocking it out of tune. So this nut,
right? Yeah, this
is pretty great, really.
This nut. So we're using a material called Tusk, again from Graphtec. It has a very flat frequency response, and it's self-lubricating, so it minimizes any stiction. Also, you can't really see it, but this is not just a notch, okay? This is a profile V that matches the string profile that's machined. Each one of these nuts is precisely machined on a CNC machine. So, I'm into the handwork when I need the handwork, but for this, I want it to be exact and I want it to be repeatable. And so this part comes off the machine, and this notch is actually carved with a little round end ball end mill that's 12 thousandths of an inch in diameter, and it carves that precisely. And again, it's self-lubricating, so it's going to give you good performance as far as stiction. I don't know if you've seen a lot of Stevens videos. You see him down there tweaking that tuner after he's bent a bunch of strings. That's what it mostly affects, is when you bend a string or play real hard, it can stick in the nut. And you see people tweaking all the time.
So I did a concert last night, and usually I strum the dulcimer, I hear that it's out of tune at the beginning of the show, and I tweak it. But when I strummed the dulcimer at the beginning of the show, it sounded close enough that I was able to just launch into talking and playing. Probably as the instrument adjusted to my body temperature, I tweaked the melody string one time, but I did not. An alarm never went off over the next 30 minutes that said, tweak this, tune this.
Right. And
that's, for me, is insane. So that's a level of tuning stability I have never enjoyed.
Right. And he's driven me nuts over the years messing with nut design. And yeah. I think I kept track. After that initial tuning, he never touched the tuners during the concert.
Best ever. Show him the head on this. So we looked at some other head designs, because most of your dulcimers have a real traditional thing going on. This is a little bit different, and I think what we wanted to go for here was, I wanted maybe a more modern look a little bit, but. What are the advantages of this new head design?
So what we've done here is we've brought the strings straight from this point. When you do a scroll or some designs of a peg head, the string has to make an angle bend when it goes through the nut. That's a point of friction that I wanted to get rid of. I've dropped this peg head angle, this break angle, to about 10 degrees to minimize the stiction in this in the nut. Once in a while, I have to repair someone's dulcimer where they have broken the peg head off. Not one of my dulcimers, but a lot of them are glued on here, and it's been done for years, and that's great. That's
very
fine.
Common.
Very common way to do it. But I wanted to do this a little different, and so. The flat peg head, if this were the raw piece of stock for a fretboard, so I machine a positive dovetail piece onto the fretboard and the negative onto here. So this slides in there. Gotta get it straight. Strides in there. I mean, not even glued. That is a solid joint. This gets glued, then this gets machined off flat, and your ebony goes over there. There's no way to break that peg head off. So I think that's something novel that we do, but again, I don't like doing repairs. And, this takes care of that. Also, if you make that stronger and you bump that really hard, you could actually split it loose from the dulcimer. So this, on a guitar, this would be thought of as a truss rod cover. But what this is actually doing is covering a very large wood screw that goes through here into this block and holds all of this together, again, to make it very, very structurally sound.
So there's a lot of sounds I want to get with dulcimers, and sometimes that means having a bunch of dulcimers. What I think we've done with this model is if I have a diatonic and a chromatic version of this, I will have just about everything I need to do most of what I do on the road and in the studio. This one in particular will be really good for effects and being on large stages, where there's 1,000 people or more, where the sound is a lot louder on stage. Mm-hmm. Having an acoustic version of this with no electronics in it, that's an option I like. And I also like having this right here that has all these options. If I have an acoustic and an electric version of a diatonic and a chromatic, that just takes care of everything. The sound of this is important. The acoustic sound of his instruments, we've been tweaking. I mean, you came up with it before I ever talked to you. It gives me a lot of the sound I've wanted for years. This is close enough to perfect for me, like the old song goes. It's very important to me.
You're pretty picky.
And I told you when we started talking about building dulcimers that I didn't want to lie to you just to get dulcimers made for me. And I've been a stickler about this. He has the woodworking knowledge, the electronics knowledge, the metalworking knowledge, design background. I don't know anybody else who could have done all this way. And what I really appreciate is we're not just talking about the obvious features on this electronic version. We're talking about electronics done right, done well, quiet, good sounding. And also we put a lot of thought into this thing being sturdy. We don't want you to drop it and have something all of a sudden doesn't work. If you look at the distance from the saddles to the nut, what is it on this roughly?
So, this is the 25.8 inch.
25.8. Now, a lot of you are looking for a 25. How much of a difference is there between a...
Well, down here where you're fretting, it's just a few thousand.
Right.
I mean,
down there where you're fretting, it's very... Basically, if you're looking for a 25, I think this is it.
In a blind test, I don't see how you could tell the difference.
And the thing that I really like about this particular reason we went to 25.8 is if you look at where the saddles are, or the bridge, where that is on the top of the instrument, I like having it exactly where it is. It seemed like a right balance of sound.
It gives us, in our experimentation, and I make a 25-inch dulcimer, and it's very warm. I think the 25.8 is a little more balanced, has a little more clarity, a little more ring than a 25. As you get them shorter, they get thumpier, less sustained. And so I think it's a great compromise.
If you want to compare on the sound between the two string lengths, make sure you're thinking sound and don't worry about feel. I don't think you're going to feel any difference between the two. So you've been looking at the diatonic version of this model. This is the chromatic version. This is actually not completed yet. It's one of the prototypes. But notice there are fret position markers on the side. This is something I don't think is really helpful on the diatonic, but on the chromatic, if you're sitting on a stage, it's nice to look down, and from my angle, those dots just stand out so well. we're looking at making these out of different things, like mother of pearl,
Right,
or maybe something that glows in the dark. We don't know if that's practical or not, but when I fly across the country and I take one instrument for a large stage, something like Winfield, let's say Walnut Valley in Kansas, I feel safe with not only the electronics part of this, which is you've got to have that for those larger stages, the piezo in particular, but you also want to have an acoustic sound because they might throw a mic up in front of you. So this is a culmination of many years of work, me wanting things, him making it happen, and a lot of back and forth and tweaking. So I feel like we've done it. We've got to this place. And I keep saying to Terry all weekend, you've done it. Congratulations.
And I keep waiting until he comes up with something else.
So there's
But
going
it's
to...
exciting to see what he can do with it.
It's exciting to see what he can do with it. So you're going to have features laid out.
Yeah, I'm
on
going to
the
do a
website.
document on the website that'll outline the features that are available. I'm not going to make 42 VSLs. I mean, you know, we have to narrow it down so we can do it. But it'll lay out the options, and it will lay out the pricing.